Hi everybody, this is Laura. Thank you so much for joining me on my channel. Today I have a layout that I made for Stretch the Sketch. In Stretch the Sketch, we take a sketch that's intended for a 12 by 12 inch layout, and we either stretch it to a larger format or we shrink it to a smaller one. As I've been doing for the past few months, I'm shrinking the sketch to a smaller format. I'm using a 6¼ by 8½ inch page. If you've watched my Stretch the Sketch videos in the past, you may know that I have been working on creating 2 albums, one for each of my 2 daughters, and these albums are about me. I took a class with Janet Fritz of Galaxy Girl Creations quite a while ago now, and this class really taught me about making sure that I tell my own story. So I've been doing it in a smaller album, and once I finished the layouts for one album, I immediately started making layouts for a second album. I'm using the same photos, but I'm just using different sketches and different layouts for each of the pages. The journaling will also be the same. This month, we're using a sketch by Allison Davis of Scrapbook Generation. She makes amazing sketches, and I really was excited when I saw this sketch because I was looking forward to making a page that had a lot of circles on it. So since there were so many circles in this sketch, I used my die cutting machine. I cut out a couple of circles, and then I picked out a number of elements from the collection I'm using. It's the My Mind's Eye Hello Gorgeous collection. It's a really old collection, but I really love it. So I use it a lot, and I thought that the colors were really good for a baby girl layout, which this is. And then I have some other chipboard pieces, some die cut pieces, and some fussy cut pieces. And I'm inking the edges of all of these pieces with some Distress Oxides. I used fired brick, evergreen bough, and fossilized amber for these pieces. And then I also used some Distress ink in Vintage Photo, and I only used that to ink the edges of this photo. However, you can't really see this color in the final layout. I'm not sure why, but I did give it a try. I started putting all these pieces together with the photo. I have a die cut piece, that's the pink paper on the right, and then I used a piece of blue chipboard with a doily on it. You won't get to see the doily because I'm going to be layering the photo right on top of the blue chipboard with the doily on it. And then once I had my photo cluster set, I started working on the background. The paper measures 6¼ inches wide by 8½ inches high. I have coated this thick white cardstock with some Liquitex gesso. And now I'm creating a very simple mixed media background with some Distress Oxide in fossilized amber. I press the stamp pad onto a piece of plastic. I add a little bit of water, and then I create a diagonal pattern for the top of the layout where I know I'm going to have my photo and then a few other circles up there. And then I knew my title cluster would be in the lower left-hand corner, so I wanted to add just a little bit of the ink down there as well. The first layer of the Distress Oxide was very light, so I waited until it dried, and then I added another layer to build the color up a little bit. I decided to go with just one color because the layout is so small and I don't want to have too much going on in this very small space, but also there are a lot of different colors I'm going to be layering on top, and I didn't want to overshadow the embellishments with the mixed media background. I added even more water to the Distress Oxide, and then I used my brush to add lots of splatters to both of those areas of color. And then I add another layer to the bottom and then add more splatters to the layout. Later on, you'll see that just a very small hint of color is visible all around the photo and all of the embellishments at the top part of the layout, and the same thing around the title cluster. There's just a little hint of this yellow color. But I think that even a little bit of mixed media showing makes a big difference on a layout. The next step was to sprinkle some water on the background, and then I placed a piece of paper towel on top of it just to soak up the water droplets. This often creates a nice water droplet effect. The effect on yellow isn't as dramatic as the effect on darker colors, but I still like that variation of color that it gives to the mixed media background. The color was looking a little bit lighter than I wanted it to. Normally I would add the water droplets at the end, but I decided to go in with another layer of color just because I wanted it to look a little bit darker than it looked, particularly on the bottom. I just wanted to mention, when using the Distress Oxides for this technique, I make sure that the plastic is dry before I press the pad against the plastic, because it could have some negative effects on the pad if the plastic is wet. So I always try to be careful to dry it off before I re-ink my plastic. I wanted to add some stenciling to the background. I'm using a stencil by Echo Park called Berry Branch. I'm using some modeling paste with some heavy body acrylic white paint mixed in with it. It makes the modeling paste not quite as thick, but it also makes it a little bit whiter. So even though it wasn't quite as thick, the stenciling still turned out fine. And I like the fact that it's a bright white for this particular layout. So I added some at the top, and then I added some at the bottom. And because the layout is so small, I didn't have to move the stencil around too much, and that definitely makes stenciling a little bit easier. Now I'm going to begin adding all of my elements to the background. The background is completely dry. I have my photo cluster that I layered up before. I also die cut out another pattern paper scalloped circle to mount that photo cluster on. I'm going to attach that down in the middle of the top area of the layout. I'm also going to use 2 die cut pieces from the My Mind's Eye collection. I have a darker pink one on the bottom, and then I have a blue one at the top. It's a journaling spot, but I'm just going to use it as an embellishment on my page. For my title, I'm using a banner that says little. I'm going to add a few more words to that. I fussy cut that out from a card. There was a pack of matching cards to go along with this collection. When I got the cards, it was in a lot that I bought. I put them in with the scrapbooking collection. I wasn't sure if I would ever use them, but I've actually used parts of these cards on quite a few layouts. For this layout, I used the banner that says little. That was fussy cut from one of the cards. And then the darker pink die cut circle that's behind the photo, that's also the back of one of the cards. And then I've used them on other layouts as well. So I guess you never know what you're going to use. I added a fussy cut bird to the layout. I also added a heart, and then I used an arrow on the upper left-hand corner along with some fussy cut flowers that I thought looked pretty, kind of going around that blue circle. I used a number of die cut buttons on this layout. I just have the one blue one right now. I love the way they are perfect for a little girl layout, but they're also perfect for this particular sketch with all the circles. I added another little grouping of fussy cut flowers to the title cluster. The title is going to read, Hello, Little Girl. I have to add a couple more words, which I'll do in a little while. I cut a small slit to the left-hand side of the brightly colored pink flower. That way I could put most of the cluster behind the banner, but put that one flower in front of the banner. There are lots and lots of circles of all different sizes on the sketch. I didn't think I had room on this smaller sized layout for all of those elements, but I did want to include lots of circles. So I pulled out all of the die cut buttons that I had that match the collection. I have 2 blue and 2 yellow. I really wanted to use that blue date arrow that's on the right-hand side of my mat. I thought it would balance out the pink one that's on the upper left-hand side of the layout, but it was just a little bit too big. And if I put it in the same general area where there's that second arrow on the sketch, it would face the title that says little, and I didn't think that would look right. So I decided to leave that off of this layout. I had a white die cut with a blue border. I'm actually not even sure if it was a die cut or if it was something you would punch out of a die cut and then throw that part away, but it was just the right size to write the word girl on it. I used the letter stickers from the collection, and then I inked the edges of all of those letter stickers with some Distress Oxide in Fire Brick, and then I tucked that right underneath the banner that says little. It looks a little awkward right now. I'm going to try to make the two look more like one unit by adding some flowers. I'll do that in a little bit. As I mentioned, the name of this collection is Hello Gorgeous. So I took a piece of packaging that had the title of the collection on it. I cut out the word hello, and then I added that to the title. Although it's not attached down, I just have that in the general area of the title. I really wanted something circular underneath the photo to connect the photo and the large circle next to it the way it is in the sketch. So I used a round wood piece that was part of the collection. I didn't want it to be wood colored though, so I used some distress oxide in Victorian velvet, and I inked the surface and the edges too. I wanted to make that little word hello a little bit more visible, so I tried inking the edges with evergreen bough distress oxide, but then I wanted it a little bit darker than that, so I used this piece of pattern paper. I picked a place that was all blue. I mounted it on that piece of pattern paper, and then I attached it down right on top of the title, so my title, Hello Little Girl, is finally complete. Because I decided to put the word hello on top of that dark pink flower, I ended up tucking that behind the banner after all. At some point, off camera, I trimmed the whole layout down just a little bit because I decided that I wanted to mount it on a piece of pattern paper. I inked the entire outside of the white background with some fired brick distress oxide. Now I'm adding some ATG adhesive, and I'm going to attach the background down to a piece of pattern paper. I felt like that whole layout needed a little bit of color around the outside edges. I added some adhesive to the back of one of the blue buttons. I put it in the lower right-hand corner. But no sooner did I put it down than I decided that I wanted to move it. And so I moved it to the upper left-hand corner, and I put a smaller yellow button in that same spot. Now I'm going to take my pencil, I'm going to go around to a few places on the page. I'm drawing some dots, and these are the places that I'm going to put some brads. Because this is an older collection, these are the old-fashioned brads that go right through your page, and I actually love these brads. These brads aren't actually part of this collection, but they're the same colors. So I used a paper piercer to punch some holes, and then I put all of these small solid colored brads through the holes. I moved a little sparkly heart sticker that I had put in a couple of different places on the layout to the center of the larger heart, and then I added a few more fussy cut flowers to the layout. I wanted to fill in the area all around the title. Then I attached down a little cluster of flowers that I already had on the layout, but I had forgotten to attach down. I love when scrapbookers include buttons on their pages and take the time to add some thread through them. So I thought that I would try that out on this layout. I once again used that same piercing tool, and I punched through all of the holes. Then I used some embroidery floss. I used all 6 strands, and I stitched through each of the holes twice. I love adding stitching to layouts. Usually I'll do a lot of stitching on a cut file. This took much less time, and I think it added a nice little touch. I noticed that there were a lot of the bright pink flowers in the title cluster, but I didn't have others on the rest of the layout, or not enough anyway. So I fussy cut out another 2 flowers, and I added them to the top of the layout. And then I began adding some enamel dots. I wanted to put white enamel dots in the centers of a lot of these little flowers. And although I didn't put an enamel dot in the middle of every single one of them, I did use enamel dots on most of them. I also put a really tiny enamel dot on the eye of the bird. Then I wanted to use a few more enamel dots in different colors. I added just a few of that same bluish green color that's in the pattern papers. And then I also added a couple of very tiny yellow enamel dots. So between the pattern paper and the buttons and the enamel dots and the brads, I did end up having a lot of circles on the layout. I also added a tiny white bow on top of the photo. This layout is complete, and here are some close-ups. Thank you so much for watching this video. It's really hard to describe how wonderful it is when I see all of the views and the likes and the comments. It really means a lot to me. Thank you so much. I highly recommend checking out all of the Stretch the Sketch videos. The links to those videos are in the description box. I hope you have a fantastic day, and I hope to see you again soon. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.